In the middle of a great ocean, the Kinloch Bravo oil rig stands tall. Since they have spent many days on the oil rig, the crew members are like family to each other. However, the leader of the oil rig, Magnus, notices that his communication is cut off from their main company of Pictor Energy. The crew member that is currently in charge of communications, Fulmer, also encounters this problem. As such, Magnus calls for a meeting with the rest of the crew. He announces that there has been a power failure, which means that those who have to head home will have to wait a little longer. One of the crew members, Hutton, repeatedly asks about the duration of the stay. He is doing this questioning for his fellow crewmate, Baz, whose leave is delayed for Fulmer. The one managing the people's schedule, Rose, informs them that an expert radio operator is needed, so she chose Fulmer. Groans can be heard from the crew members who think the move is unfair. Suddenly, the lights begin to flicker and the alarm sounds off, which means they have to do a procedure regarding blackouts. As the workers make their preparation, they notice that the nearby oil rig is also having trouble on its own. Just then, the power on the whole rig finally comes back. But despite this, the radio is still dead. Afterward, Fulmer announces to the crew that the emergency is over, much to their dismay because they are already on standby and awaiting orders. All of a sudden, the whole oil rig begins to violently rattle. Following that brief shaking, they see a huge cloud of fog roll out in the distance. The gigantic fog rapidly covers everything in sight. In such a thick fog, no helicopter can fly in or out of the oil rig. Because they need communications from their company to function properly, especially due to the sudden change of weather, Magnus instructs Fulmer and Baz to check the radio tower. And so, after being promised that he will head home, Baz accepts the mission with Fulmer. Afterward, the two of them reach the top, and Fulmer immediately goes to work. Baz takes this opportunity to ask why Fulmer was the one chosen to replace his already settled leave schedule. Of course, Fulmer has no idea about the reason because Rose changed it at the last minute. Fulmer finally fixes the tower and hands over a radio device to Baz. Baz momentarily drops the device. With Baz reaching down to get the device, Fulmer decides to head down first. However, in just a few moments, Baz falls onto the metallic floors below the tower. Magnus and Hutton, who are waiting for the two men to come back, are shocked by this. Fulmer, who has gotten down, is instantly filled with regret for going down first. The medic, Cat, immediately comes to the rescue and informs Magnus that the young man is still alive. Later on, Fulmer tries yet again to contact the main base for medical evacuation with Rose by his side. He is still mad at himself for leaving Baz instead of following after him because he is the more experienced one. Rose tells him that it is not his fault. She then kisses him, revealing that she and Fulmer are in a relationship. Meanwhile, Baz is taken to the medic bay to be treated for his injuries. After checking his condition, Kat informs everyone that Baz needs to be taken to the hospital immediately. Hutton is furious upon hearing this from her, but he cannot do anything about it. Still not wanting to drop the issue, Hutton heads directly to Magnus' office to request a helicopter. Of course, due to the fog and the lack of communication, a helicopter cannot be sent. When Hutton implies that Fulmer has something to do with Baz's fall, Magnus becomes irritated with him. As such, Magnus leaves his office to talk with Rose. However, Hutton sees a memo on Magnus' desk and decides to secretly read its contents. A while later, Baz finally wakes up from his slumber. But instead of just waking up, he has a vision of cracking seafloors. At the same time, the crew members all head up to the deck due to a commotion, which is caused by Hutton. Rose and Magnus are quickly informed about this. For this reason, they speedily head up there to find Hutton giving a speech about the lies and deceit of both Magnus and Pictor Energy. This forces Magnus to say the truth, that the whole field of oil rigs is being decommissioned by Pictor Energy. What this means is that they will be out of job. Still, he promises that he will get them all home safe and sound. All of a sudden, a slow rain of ash begins to fall. Just then, a naked Baz emerges, cryptically telling them that it is already too late. As such, Kat and the others taken back to the medic bay to rest while Magnus instructs his crew to lock Hutton in his room. Afterward, Kat and Rose talk with Baz to make sure he is alright. Baz responds that he is, although he cannot remember ever going to the helideck. As Kat injects medicine into the young man's body, Baz suddenly becomes aggressive, telling the two that a big wave is coming. Later on, Kat discusses with Rose her worry regarding Baz's condition, stating that he should not have healed at such a rapid pace. As they leave, Baz quietly wakes up and looks at one of his wounds. He sees that it is currently healing. Meanwhile, out in the foggy waters, the crew spots a flickering light from a nearby ship. It seems to be communicating via Morse code. A crew member named Lek is instructed by Alwyn to get the message. And so, Lek heads to the helideck to get a better view of the flickering light. He then delivers the message to Magnus and others. According to Fulmer, the Morse code being delivered is calling for possible assistance. Magnus wants to deliver back the same message. Afterward, Magnus heads to the oil rig's pantry to talk with the head chef, Murch. He wants to know if there is enough food supply for the whole crew, which Murch confirms. A while later, Baz wakes up again and sees that his wound has now completely healed. Suddenly, he falls to his bed, having yet another catastrophic vision of the whole Kinloch Bravo being swallowed by giant tidal waves. He immediately heads to his cabin to get his uniforms and locate the helideck from the map. There, he suddenly feels a sharp pain in his jaw, resulting in the removal of a golden tooth from his mouth. Meanwhile, Alwyn and the others discuss the possibility of a gigantic tidal wave devouring their oil rig. Although the scientific-minded Rose believes that such waves cannot happen in their region of the world, Alwyn believes otherwise because it already happened millions of years ago. During this time, Kat informs Magnus that Baz is missing. Not wanting to send the whole crew into panic, he instructs Kat to search for him discreetly. It turns out that Baz is actually in Alwyn's office at the helideck. Alwyn manages to spot him writing circles on the window glass. He asks the young man if he is alright, and Baz responds that he doesn't know because his head is full of noises. Upon touching him, Baz gets another intense apocalyptic vision, prompting him to run out of the office. Alwyn calls out to him, but to no avail. Meanwhile, after spending some considerable time on the helideck, Lek decides to head back inside. Due to the ash fall, he wants to take a bath to wash away the accumulated ash from his body. As he takes off his uniform, he notices a dark liquid has been splattered on the wall. He checks on his body and sees ash, so he wipes it off, but blood comes out instead. Even his tattoos are slipping off of his body. Slowly but surely, he becomes weakened. He also starts to convulse as blood comes out of his eyes, screaming as he feels pain all over his body. Later on, a woman named Heather delivers food to Lek's room. Hearing no response from the man, she places the food on top of Lek's cabinet. However, she sees some droplets of blood on the floor, leading her to see Lek's already lifeless body. For this reason, she immediately calls the control room to inform them about the man's death, prompting Magnus and others to check. Upon checking, they confirm that Lek has died. The head of safety, Dunlin, also finds Baz's golden tooth at his cabin and shows it to Magnus and the others. They find it strange that anorganic materials are being rejected from their bodies. Magnus thinks that the ash might have triggered it. As this happens, Hutton finally breaks out of his room by quietly going out through his window. After jamming the metallic door that leads inside, he heads straight to the control room. There, Hutton spells out SOS in Morse code using the lights of Kinloch Bravo, attracting the nearby boat. Meanwhile, Fulmer and Alwyn search the vicinity after seeing some blue light. After checking a submarine, Fulmer makes a mistake in closing the submarine doors, wounding his hand. Suddenly, they see the lights of the whole oil rig spell out SOS. Fulmer and Alwyn quickly head back because they do not want the boat to come in as it might crash into the oil rig due to the thick fog. But the door is locked due to Hutton's doing. Aside from this, they notice that the ash fall has suddenly stopped. Alwyn tells Fulmer to get the attention of whoever is on the other side of the door while he heads upstairs. Luckily, Magnus and Rose hear the commotion, with Magnus expertly opening the jammed door. Because she is there earlier, Heather identifies Hutton as the one who jammed the door, telling them that he has gone to the control room. As Magnus rushes to the control room, Rose notices Fulmer's wound. He informs her that he is alright and that the ash fall has completely stopped. Even though they have managed to reach the control room, it is already too late because the boat is coming and Hutton has pressed the alarm button. For this reason, the crew members immediately pack up their things and gather in the meeting room. All Magnus can do is tell Hutton to join the others in the meeting room. Fulmer makes an effort to at least deliver a message to the incoming boat to change course immediately. Magnus also announces to everyone to return inside if they are still currently outside. Alwyn hears this announcement, but he also spots Baz somewhere in the oil rig, prompting him to head to the young man instead. Seeing that Alwyn is still outside, Magnus wants to retrieve him, but Dunlin offers himself instead to do the task. Meanwhile, Alwyn finally finds Baz. He tells Baz to return with him, but Baz doesn't want to go back. Because of this, Alwyn tries to force the young man to come with him, but Baz chokes him instead. All of a sudden, water starts to come out of Alwyn's mouth, killing him through drowning. Dunlin arrives and sees the whole incident. Baz flees upon seeing him. Fortunately, the boat manages to dodge in time, sparing them. At this moment, Magnus has finally arrived, only to see Dunlin and a lifeless Alwyn. He tries his best to revive Alwyn, but to no avail. Even with Kat's help, it is already too late for the man. Afterward, Rose discovers that the ash contains a parasitic organism that infects a person if exposed for too long or through wounds and cuts. It prefers a healthy host, which is why it drives away anything inorganic out of the body. She quickly informs Magnus and Kat about this crucial information. Later on, Heather notices that the fog is finally lifting, giving hope to the whole crew. Because the fog has lifted, they see the nearby oil rig covered in thick smoke, indicating that it suffered from a fire. A while later, Fulmer sees Baz inside Rose's laboratory. He is looking for the blood sample which Rose experimented upon earlier. Fulmer attempts to talk with him to drop the blood sample. However, Baz immediately recognizes that Fulmer is already infected like him via the wound in his palm. As such, Baz identifies him as similar to him. At this moment, Rose enters and sees the two. Baz quickly flees from the room upon seeing the woman, taking the blood sample with him. He heads to the production module that is situated on the other side of their oil rig to hide himself from the rest of the crew. There he changes the property of the stored oil by growing some plants within its dark liquid. Rose asks Fulmer what he and Baz have been talking about, but Fulmer only tells her Baz's vision, refusing to reveal to Rose and others about his infection. They call Magnus and inform him about the incident. Due to the importance of Baz's disappearance, Magnus calls for an urgent and immediate meeting. After the crew manages to gather, Magnus tells them that Baz needs to be retrieved due to the blood sample that he has. He finally reveals the parasitic organism that resides in the ash during the ash fall, as well as its mode of infection. He then creates teams and splits them up to find Baz much more quickly. He groups Heather, Murch, and the crane driver named Easter to go to the mud pit room. However, he places Dunlin with Hutton and a tiny man named Garrow to head to the storage room. And so the groups make their preparation and head to the production module to extract Baz and make sure that things are still functioning well inside. Later on, Garrow heads to the storage room where Baz is hiding. Because Garrow has no idea yet that he is hiding there, Baz takes this opportunity to assault him. When Dunlin and Hutton arrive, it is only Garrow that they manage to spot there, but he now has a wound in his palm. They also notice the plants that have grown from the oil, confusing them. Aside from this, they also see two locked containers that they haven't seen before. Here, Dunlin asks Garrow to show his hands. Garrow slowly shows his palm, revealing an inorganic object. Now confirmed as infected, Garrow quickly flees from Dunlin and Hutton. Suddenly, a huge tremor rocks the Kinloch Bravo, causing the men to head outside of the platform and leaving only Heather behind. Aside from this, the power throughout the whole oil rig goes out. While they are fixing the power, Heather eventually spots Baz inside a big room that is full of spores. There, Baz tells her about an ancient memory that has been replaying in his head. Heather reassures Baz that she believes him and all he needs to do is to come back with them so that he can be helped. But the young man refuses. Garrow also emerges from the dark, now aiding Baz in his mission. Upon realizing that Heather was left behind inside the dark mud pit room, Hutton heads back to retrieve her. Due to Garrow and Baz's presence inside the production module, Magnus locks the narrow bridge that connects the two platforms. However, the crew notices that the tower responsible for the burning of excess gas has suddenly stopped. If this goes on, the whole oil rig might explode due to the unreleased pressure. They discuss that it needs to be manually lit on fire using a flare gun due to the ignition system being unresponsive. Here, Fulmer volunteers to do the risky job, even though Rose doesn't want him to. And so Fulmer heads to the crane being driven by Easter. But instead of just firing from a distance, Fulmer decides to come dangerously close to ensure that he will not miss. Of course, due to the danger, his crewmates protest against his actions, but he nevertheless continues. After firing his flare gun, he runs back as the fire violently erupts. Fortunately, he manages to run back in time before the fire consumes him whole, although his back gets caught by the fire, causing him to fall unconscious. As such, Kat and the others immediately transfer his body back to the medic bay. Meanwhile, Baz gets another vision of the platform being destroyed. He tells Garrow that they need to stop the well injection from pumping oil out of the ocean so that the ancient organism will not be hurt anymore. Back in the medic bay, Fulmer wakes up with Rose by his side. Rose admonishes him for his heroic yet reckless act, and Fulmer just jokes in response. She then heads out of the medic bay and finds Kat and Heather. Kat, who is in a relationship with another woman back home, decides to reveal to them that she is pregnant, which is why she wants to head home immediately to her wife. However, this is bad news because she should have announced this before boarding Kinloch Bravo due to the danger attached to the job. Later on, Rose researches the ancient organism while Heather and Fulmer are assisting her. As Rose discusses the possible origin of the bacteria, Fulmer is secretly drawing circles on the paper, similar to Baz's behavior earlier. Suddenly, Magnus calls for Rose and Dunlin to the control room. There they see Baz and their camera messing with the control of the wellhead to add more pressure to the oil rig, which will lead to an explosion. For this reason, the crew decides to use the Bullseye, a tiny drone-like submarine that is remotely driven by Easter. Upon submerging into the waters below, the crew finds a huge concentric pattern underneath the oil rig, which is similar to Baz and Fulmer's drawings. Due to his expertise, Easter masterfully closes the wellhead valve, preventing the pressure from rising further. Afterward, radio and communication signals suddenly return. And so the crew members scramble for their radio devices, with Magnus immediately calling the Coast Guard for rescue. Kat also manages to connect with her wife via video call. However, her wife tells her that a huge cloud of fog is arriving at their shore. Kat attempts to warn her, but the signal gets choppy again. Magnus also fails to fully connect with the Coast Guard. Aside from this, Rose also shockingly discovers Fulmer's concentric drawings. During this time, Baz telepathically communicates with Fulmer to help them with their mission, freaking out Fulmer. Because of the whole fiasco regarding the signals, Magnus gathers the crew once again to talk about their different experiences earlier. Some of them managed to contact the people on the mainland while some did not. Due to the rising tension in the crew, Hutton angrily confronts Kat, leading to a brief scuffle. This is stopped when Heather accidentally blurts out that Kat is pregnant. Infuriated, Magnus admonishes Kat for hiding such a huge secret. However, he breaks down as well due to being reminded of a traumatic event caused by poor decisions. Many years ago, he was supposed to head home but decided to stay a bit more to manage the crew. This decision inadvertently led to his son's death due to not being present for him, causing Magnus to carry that guilt until now. Because of this, Rose decides to temporarily take the lead, promising the crew that she will get them all rescued. Later on, Rose confronts Fulmer, who is currently checking if his wounds have rapidly healed. Fulmer tells her about Baz's remote communication, as well as apologizing for being infected. Rose reassures him not to worry too much. However, after Rose leaves the room, Fulmer has decided to come to Baz's side. As such, Kat later sees Fulmer crossing the metal bridge toward the production module, so she attempts to retrieve him. At the other platform, the spores carefully and curiously approach Kat's stomach. Rose also arrives and sees this strange phenomenon before taking Kat away to safety. All of a sudden, a light flashes on the dark waters below. The crowd cheers because they thought it was the Coast Guard. However, it turns out to be a lifeboat from the nearby oil rig. Although disappointed, the crew quickly rescues the lifeboat. Only a few survivors come out of the lifeboat. Among these survivors is a large man named Coke, a researcher from Pictor. Earlier, he secretly conducted the destruction of the nearby oil rig, masking it as a legitimate company procedure. In reality, he wanted to destroy the oil rigs around the vicinity due to the presence of the ancient organism there. Aside from him, a man named Harish also comes out of the lifeboat. Easter quickly recognizes him because he used to have a loving relationship with him. Right off the bat, the aggressive Coke wants to head to the control room. Because he has superiority over Rose due to his position, he is allowed to go there. In the control room, Coke reveals that Rose is actually the head of decommissioning, causing Dunlin to lose his trust in her. Later on, after apologizing to Kat, Magnus formally meets with Coke, introducing himself as the leader of the crew. Meanwhile, Kat is screening the newly arrived survivors to see if they are infected or not. She then visits Rose and sees her extensive research about the circular pattern as appeared frequently. All of a sudden, the whole idea clicks in Rose's head. The circular patterns represent the 5 major extinction events that happened millions of years ago. The last ring is unfinished because it represents the modern age, whose extinction is currently underway. Just then, Magnus and Coke walk into the room to see Rose's report about the ancient organism wanting to destroy them. Immediately, Coke suggests that they should strike the organism first, but Rose wants to study it first. Because she has Magnus' support, Coke has no choice but to leave the room. On the other hand, Dunlin informs Hutton and Murch about Coke's arrival and his revelation about Rose's true role. As such, the 3 old men decide to talk with Coke because they think he is more competent than Magnus' management. The opportunistic Coke readily takes the lead, giving the 3 old men their tasks. First, he tells them that the contents of the unknown containers are actually TO2, which they can use to make Baz and Garrow sleep. Second, after knocking them out with a chemical, they will manually enable the fire suppression system in the production module while wearing gas masks. Coke will then override the system through the control room. The 3 diligently follow him, although Dunlin is now hesitant to trust him. Still, Hutton convinces him to continue with the plan. As they open the unknown containers, they see numerous canisters of CO2 inside. Yet again, Dunlin shares his doubt about Coke's true intention, but Hutton insists that Coke is correct. And so they proceed with the plan. Immediately, Baz, Fulmer, and Garrow breathe in the chemical. The canisters actually contain poisonous gas, killing Garrow in an instant. The plants also shrivel and die from the toxic air. Here, the three old men have a horrible realization that Coke had tricked them. As Coke locks the hallway doors one by one, the three run back to the entrance of the production module. Unfortunately, Dunlin gets trapped inside one of the doors. Only having limited oxygen, he quickly runs out of breathable air, eventually dying by the door. Hutton screams for his name repeatedly, but he is already dead. By the time Magnus and the others see Coke in the control room, it is already too late. Realizing this, Rose heads to the production module to save Fulmer. After seeing Dunlin's corpse on her way there, she eventually sees Fulmer on the floor. Initially, he appears to be dead, but after Rose touches the plants, it triggers something in the ancient organism that causes both Fulmer and Baz to regain consciousness. As such, Rose manages to return with Fulmer by her side. Later on, Magnus hears Hutton's fit of rage in his room. He still feels guilty about Dunlin's death. Magnus empathizes with him, telling him to stop blaming himself for a death he did not cause. For the first time, an agreement is made between the two, with Hutton telling Magnus that they will avenge Dunlin's death. At that moment, the final circle deep in the ocean is finally completed, finalizing the feared extinction event. Due to the disastrous event in the production module, Magnus interviews the survivors of the nearby rig, including Coke. Finally, all alone with Magnus, Coke reveals his true intention of destroying the entire ancient organism because it will soon attack people from the mainland. Of course, Magnus doesn't agree with this. By this point, the tremors are getting worse. Later on, Rose discusses with Fulmer the telepathic communication with Baz earlier, stating that the ancient organism must have been communicating with them this whole time. And so, they talk to Magnus about their plan to communicate with Baz. Fulmer extends his hands toward the plant in front of him. Here, he sees a vision of destruction, immediately informing Rose about the organism's plan to create gigantic tidal waves. Despite this, Rose insists that they should communicate with it rather than kill it. Coke tries his best to convince them otherwise, but Magnus and the others have already made up their mind to rescue Baz and talk with the organism. Because of this, Coke secretly talks with Harish, telling him that 2 helicopters will come for him and that Harish can be rescued. For this reason, Harish joins him in the control room. Secretly, Harish opens the oil rig's microphone to discreetly reveal Coke's plan to escape via a helicopter. As such, Easter and the others rush to the control room to corner Coke. Meanwhile, Magnus, Fulmer, and Rose head to the production module. After briefly paying respect to Dunlin, they proceed to the heart of the platform to find Baz. There, they see Baz surrounded by blue-colored spores. They immediately convince Baz to come with them. Suddenly, a large tremor rattles the whole platform. Still, Rose tries to talk with the ancient organism. However, the spores form a complete circle, signifying that the extinction event has begun. As such, the group has no choice but to run out of the production module. However, Baz decides to stay behind as a sacrifice to appease the ancient organism. At the same time, a gigantic tidal wave is viewed out on the horizon. The helicopters for Coke have finally arrived. Hutton threatens Coke that he will kill him if he doesn't allow his comrades to be rescued, leaving Coke with no choice but to allow this. For this reason, the crew members rush toward the first helicopter. Fortunately, Magnus, Fulmer, and Rose manage to catch up in time with the second helicopter. At that moment, the tidal wave reaches Kinloch Bravo, swallowing the whole oil rig entirely. Inside the helicopter, Kat realizes that the tidal wave might reach her wife's home, so she asks if they can save them. However, Coke mysteriously tells them that the helicopters are heading somewhere else instead. With the future undetermined, all of the crew members look distraught and confused despite being rescued.